I guess it would be nice to be able to tell a mulberry tree to go jump in the ocean. But not only do I not know what a mulberry tree looks like, I also have a few other things I'd like to uproot first. This is Respect Life Month, Latino Heritage Month, and here at Newman, Welcoming and Reaching Out Month. Why not uproot racism, poverty, war, abortion, and other violence? Haven't we had those things around long enough? As today's prophecy from Habakkuk says, "How long, O Lord? I cry for help, but you do not listen. I cry out to you violence, but you do not intervene." Can I uproot all this violence with my faith? And while I'm at it, a few of my persistent sins and other unhelpful habits, and maybe some of yours too? This is also the month we're all getting ready to vote. So maybe we can start with the uprooting by preparing to vote. Now, how many of you are voting for the first time, November 8th? Wow, cool. Congratulations. That's awesome. Well, don't worry. The rest of us are absolute experts. Ask any of us and we'll tell you exactly how to vote. But seriously, maybe we can start with having faith in the power of our vote and in using the tenets of our faith to decide how to vote. But wait a minute, some of you say, why is Father Dominic preaching about politics? Some people mistakenly think politics doesn't have anything to do with religion. While it's true that tax-exempt entities, including religious groups, cannot support a particular candidate or party, or devote an unspecified substantial amount of their efforts lobbying for particular issues, we probably wouldn't want to do too much of that anyway, especially saying vote for this candidate or that party. The most important thing our bishops and others do regarding voting is to remind us of the moral obligation to vote and to help us educate and help us to learn and apply the moral teachings of the Church. How long, O Lord, will the violence continue? And the Lord responds to Habakkuk, write down the vision clearly upon the tablets so that one can read it readily. The vision. Through our Catholic tradition, God gives us a clear vision of a society that relies on goodness rather than violence. For example, every 4 years in preparation for the general election, the U.S. bishops revised their statement, Forming Consciences for Faithful Citizenship, in order to help us address current issues in light of God's vision. And their comments are always rooted in 4 basic pillars of Catholic social teaching. So before I share a few specific points about the November California ballot, let's take a look at these 4 basic pillars of Catholic social teaching. Now, for this part, I'm going to need some generous volunteers who are willing to stand up here for, I'm not sure if it'll be 10 minutes or 5. We'll see how you're doing. So, first, is there a baby here that can bring up one or both of its parents? Or maybe a pregnant woman. If the pregnant father wants to come up with her, that's okay. Okay, how about somebody with a small child willing to come up? While they're figuring that out, is there anybody, is there someone here who considers themselves old who would come up? I had somebody here the other day tell me that she's decided she's old now. I won't mention her name and ask her to come up, but so I need a couple people. Let's have somebody on the young side and somebody on the older side up here. Oh, thank you so much. That's awesome. Yeah, your father's getting older every day. That's good. Thanks. Oh, I know. No, you're the young one, but Kirsten, that's good. Front and center. Kirsten, thank you for being brave. Yeah. Why don't you come right in the center? That'll work out really good. So, the first pillar of Catholic social teaching, and the preeminent one, is the dignity of the human person. Look how dignified they are. Everyone, absolutely everyone, the young, the old, the healthy, the disabled, the innocent, the guilty, everyone is made in the image of God, and their life should be cherished and protected. Even Harold. The California bishops have specified timely goals, and here is one that attaches to the pillar of the dignity of the human person: to protect human life by working against human embryo destruction, abortion, euthanasia, assisted suicide, execution, and unjust war. Now say there, for the second pillar, I need someone who considers himself short and someone who considers himself tall. Come on up. As you're coming up, I'll say, the second pillar of Catholic social teaching, you're tall, Kier. Would you mind coming up? Who would consider themselves short? No? Kier, why don't you stand on the other side of them, like give yourself about 5 feet from them. Well, you're not probably short for your age. Oh, good. Thank you so much. So, the second pillar of Catholic social teaching is subsidiarity, which means that larger institutions in society, raise your hand here, such as the federal government, should not overwhelm or interfere with smaller or local institutions, such as more local governments. Yet, larger institutions do have essential responsibilities when the more local institutions cannot adequately protect human dignity. When she can't do it, Kier, then you have to help. So, a classic example of this, when not all states were willing or able to legislate against racism, the federal government finally stepped in with the Civil Rights Act in the 60s. The current goal the California bishops put before us that attaches itself to the pillar of solidarity is to protect and support children, other individuals, and families in the U.S. and internationally by working against poverty and racism and by providing education, health care, and decent work at fair living wages. Now, for the third pillar, why don't you all come together? And anybody feel like joining them? A couple people, maybe? Thank you, Jasmine and Julia. The third pillar of Catholic social teaching is the common good, which the Second Vatican Council said is the sum total of social conditions which allow people, either as groups or individuals, to reach their fulfillment more fully and more easily. So why don't you all reach for your fulfillment? Good, okay. And we're going to help them. The common good, that's what this is called. You can unreach now. Specifically, the California bishops ask us to focus these days on ensuring full conscience protection and religious freedom so that we can work together to overcome poverty, pursue the common good, and care for creation. You might have noticed that lots of the issues presented by the California bishops attach themselves to more than one pillar. I've done the attaching for us. So for the fourth and last pillar, would some of you come up who don't already see someone like you up here? Would a few people come up if you feel like maybe there's somebody who doesn't quite look like you, feel like you? We got male and female. Maybe there's somebody not from your racial or ethnic heritage that you maybe would guess, or maybe you're not sure, so you want to come up anyway. Let's have a couple more people come up. Thank you. Thanks, Roger. I don't see any Venezuelans up here. Anybody else want to come up? I don't see any Indians up here. Mukesh, Sherry. I don't see any redheads up here. Anybody else? Thank you, Brian. Anybody else? Let's all come up. No, just kidding. So for this one, now all of you link arms, will you? Link arms, yes. The fourth pillar of Catholic social teaching is solidarity, which recognizes that we are one human family, whatever our national, racial, ethnic, economic, follicle, and ideological differences. One of the goals the California bishops put in front of us that most obviously attaches to the pillar of solidarity is to achieve comprehensive immigration reform that offers a path to citizenship, treats immigrant workers fairly, prevents the separation of families, and addresses the factors that compel people to leave their own countries. So there you have it, the four pillars of Catholic social teaching: the dignity of the human person, subsidiarity, the common good, and solidarity. Now, if anybody's really tired, go ahead and sit down. But if somebody sits down, it'd be great if somebody stood up to replace them. So at any point, if you need to sit down. So what does all this have to do with the California ballot? Of course, first of all, there's the 5 candidates to choose from for president. That's right, I looked it up this week. Did you know there are 5 presidential candidates on the California ballot? And there are 2 candidates for the U.S. Senate. Now, do any of them hold all 4 Catholic pillars in high regard? Are we doomed if they don't? Now, you may run across so-called Catholic voter guides that talk about non-negotiables. Ignore them. Pope Benedict, the U.S. bishops, and our own bishop have countered that while certain issues are especially fundamental, especially protection of life issues such as abortion, assisted suicide, execution, and unjust war, voters must use their conscience to weigh these and other issues against each other. In faithful citizenship, the U.S. bishops say that decisions should take into account a candidate's commitments, character, integrity, and ability to influence a given issue. In other words, there is no Catholic litmus test for a candidate. We don't get off so easy as just to be able to check off boxes. We have to use, like so many other things in Catholicism, we have to use our minds and hearts. Which candidates will help these people standing before you best, especially the poor, vulnerable, and others who are furthest from the table? Now, briefly, what about those 17 propositions California voters are asked to wade through? And apparently there are another 12 or so measures for San Diego voters that haven't even officially been released yet, as far as I could tell. Now, here's where the California bishops have done at least a little specific work for us. There are 2 propositions regarding the death penalty. Of course, California bishops are recommending we vote for the one that would remove the death penalty. The only other proposition they're making a recommendation on is 57, the one that takes steps towards making our criminal justice system not just punitive, but also focus on rehabilitation, treatment, and education programs. Of course, the bishops recommend a yes vote on that. But again, our obligation is to vote our conscience. That is, a conscience which may disagree with church teaching, but which is formed by reflecting on and praying with church teaching. When looking at these and other measures, we can keep in mind this group of people and the 4 pillars that hold them up: dignity of human life, subsidiarity, common good, and solidarity. Will the proposition or measure serve these people, especially the ones furthest from the table, the poor, vulnerable, and otherwise excluded? Also, on a really practical note, you might want to start with the Crick reference guide at the beginning of that book. You might want to use the web link at the bottom of page 17 to see a list of especially large donors. That tells you a lot. And remember that in real terms, due to inflation, bonds generally cost 1.3 times as much as their value in the long run. And you might possibly seek analysis from 1 or 2 groups that, though probably not explicitly, value some or all of the 4 pillars. But again, in the end, the obligation is to make our own decision and to follow our conscience, not anybody else's. What will serve these people best, especially those furthest from the table. I'm almost done, so hang in there. God says to Habakkuk, "For the vision still has its time, presses on to fulfillment, and will not disappoint. If it delays, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not be late." As Catholics, we press toward this vision by expressing our faith in God through our vote. And may our voting and prayerful preparation for voting embolden us to take ongoing responsibility once the election is over for the manifestation of God's vision, a vision whose fulfillment ultimately relies on God's action, not our faith, however short or tall.